reports very interesting things, and I would recommend that you read it. But they gave a particular example, which I'm just going to pull out for you, which says it's predicted that 41% of all work activities in South Africa are susceptible to automation. And they also gave percentages for a couple of other countries. But I just thought I would pick out one. And when they say that 41% of work activities in a particular country are susceptible to automation, it means in a couple of years, those 40% of people will be replaced in those activities. And that is one of the impacts. The other thing that is an impact that I want to raise before we go into the discussions is that clearly, if there's going to be job phasing out, our response is going to be that we reskill. Now, this is going to affect us in two ways. The young people are at an advantage. So if you're in here and you're young, you haven't started a career, you're just in school, or you are just about to start a career, I'm glad that you are one of the fortunate people, because when I started considering this at a personal level, I noticed that it actually impacts in my life in two ways. The first is that being already a professional who has been at it for many years, I actually have to reskill. What that means for me is that I have to go back to school in a way or another. Now that's frightening. If you're 45, 50, 60, and someone tells you that you've been this expert and you've known this for a very long time, and now you have to go and study or make yourself relevant, that's not a very pleasant piece of news. But that's where we're at. Let me see what else I wanted to say. So it's important to know that the degree to which people will have relevant skills in the era of the fourth industrial revolution is highly dependent on the degree of relevance of the education system through which they gain knowledge, skills, and general preparedness for life. I think these things, Dr. Magara raised them. So suffice it to mention that even in the third industrial revolution, which we have already heard much about, we already had, particularly in Africa, increasing irrelevance of education systems and of teaching approaches and of curricula. And this is evidenced by nearly a whole generation of millennials not adequately prepared for the workplace and hence unprecedented levels of unemployment. I think you'll agree with me that if you look at the young generation of about the 20s to 30s, around about there, this is the generation that has actually suffered the most because they've been through an education system that completely prepared them the wrong way, and the kind of education they have and the skills required of them to be in the workplace are completely mismatched. You'll agree with me that most of them are unemployed, partly because the world doesn't have the kind of job opportunities that matches their education and their skills. So as much as we can talk, we can't really talk about the future without talking about the future of work without paying careful attention to the education systems that produces the workforce. So with me this morning, I have the pleasure of having great men, as you see them. Fortunately, two of them have already spoken. David Casey, as I was listening to him, I was thinking, wow, okay, this thing is moving faster than my brain can work. We have Ron. Yes, we have Ron Kawamara, Dr. Magara, who spoke earlier, and then Dr. Ramadan Gobi. There's one speaker that I had who is not here. So allow me to go straight into the questions that we're going to have for them and the discussions. I also intend to ask a couple of questions from the audience, and I'm hoping that you'll prepare a couple of questions for them, and then we'll wrap this up. Is this working? Okay, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
You're all welcome, and I'm going to go straight to the questions. Let me start with David, last speaker, because you had very interesting things. Just briefly paint for us a picture of the future of work. What jobs will be trending and what jobs will be paying, because that's everyone's question, is how will I get money? And will people go to offices? Just generally tell us, what do you think the future of work looks like? Paint for us a picture.
Yeah, so I think that what we know of as a job today will look completely different in the future, and we may not even call it a job. I think when someone wakes up in the morning, they'll have a few things that they could do, whether it's working for some kind of decentralized producing value, participating in the sharing economy in the ways that I mentioned, whether it's purchasing or working in referral networks for an e-commerce platform, setting up ways that you can share resources that you produce, such as renewable energy, or many other things. And when you wake up in the morning, you might feel like doing one thing, you might be in a creative state, or you might feel like you're in a productive, linear state, just knocking out tasks. And because of incoming ubiquitous internet access through satellite internet around the world, I think that people working from their smartphones, once we have universal smartphone access and internet access, things will look very different. People won't need to move into cities the way that they do today. And we'll have a lot more kind of open choices to work and participate in networks. And I don't think we'll have these go to an office, work 8 hours on one job, go home and do that for years. I think that will become less and less the norm, and more work will be something flexible and based on what time of the day, what day of the month, what month of the year, it could look really different.
Wow, okay, that's interesting. I hope you're envisioning this kind of world. Maybe just quickly to follow up with you, David, do you see this in 50 years or 5 years? Like what?
And so this reality is already present today. I mentioned there will be 1 billion digital nomads by 2035, location-independent workers that can work from anywhere. And it will emerge more in some parts of the world than others, as I mentioned, based on universal access to smartphones and universal internet access. So I think it will be a gradual transition. It won't be, all of it happening in 5 years or 50 years, but it's already happening today.
Okay. Thank you very much, David. My next question will go to Dr. James Magara. You're an expert in leadership, and you have mentored several people. In your blogs and in your book, you do talk about the importance of think tanks as part of the collective effort of embracing transition to the future. Kindly explain what think tanks are and what they do, and do we have the right kind of think tanks in Africa to help us?
Okay, thank you. Think tanks are, there's no one definition of what think tanks are, but the basic concept is having groups of people who conduct research or take on research and make it relevant for policymakers and decision makers. It is giving thought, exercising the mind to problems that are in society. If you look at the most recent information from the University of Pennsylvania concerning think tanks around the world, you find that the most advanced countries in the world have a larger number of think tanks. The largest, the United States has the largest number. I forget the exact number now, but they have well over 1,000. Then you have them in Europe. China has now recognized the importance of think tanks. And a couple of years ago, the government financed 100 think tanks. They began to realize how important these are in driving the decision-making process. Unfortunately, Africa has really been lagging behind. And that's one of the reasons I strongly advocate for the formation of, there can be private think tanks, there can be states think tanks, to guide the decision-making process. And it doesn't have to be only for the state, but for organizations. So that decisions that are made are well thought through, they apply systems thinking, you avoid unintended consequences, which often happens when we have a knee-jerk reaction to responding to issues in the society. And so we'll need a lot of this as we think about the future. Because in Africa, we also tend to think that we must follow the path of the Western world. Actually, if you think well enough, we can leapfrog, yes, as has already been said yesterday. I remember as a student in the UK in the early 90s watching a TV advert of mobile phones. They were saying that in a few years, Africans will be using them on the streets. I remember laughing because I was even saying UK. But less than 10 years later, it was here. We skipped all the process of putting up poles and having central control systems because we from that whole process. Now already, not only is it here, but mobile phones are being used for innovation. So you don't have to follow that process. But there has to be thinking that is applied by the agency, by the intellectuals and groups of people to find what is the best path to take. And this is the role think tanks play.
Thank you very much, Dr. Magara. I will just follow in with a clarification question on that. How do we get governments and leaders in government to pay attention to this very critical aspect? Because I feel like we can make a response to the fourth industrial revolution at a personal level, but also we need to think about countries and nations. So how do we get the attention of our leaders to believe in this, to respect the outcomes of such think tanks and so on?
It has to be by sensitizing. Advocacy is going to play a big role, and I'd like to commend the organizers of this conference just to know that within a year, by engaging leaders, three things have happened from last year to this year. I think once people understand, once the leadership begins to understand the importance of certain things, they will take note. I mean, maybe not all of them will, because the information out of think tanks is useless unless the leaders can act on it. And I'm very heartened by some of the examples from Southeast Asia. South Korea realized very early why this was important, and so they spent a lot of money in the 70s setting up government think tanks to help them chart the way forward. And it was out of that setup that they decided on public-private partnerships. Daewoo, Samsung, LG, was another one. These companies came as a result of decisions made out of think tanks. Today, they're household names all over the world. And as leaders begin to see the importance of having informed decision making, and this will happen when people involved in think tanks and groups like this engage them deliberately.
My next question will go to, I think, Dr. Gobi, Ramdan Gobi. I think it's related, so let me go there. How should governments and higher institutions of learning in Africa prepare themselves to change their teaching environment or curriculum in order to produce graduates fit for the future?
Thank you. And I'm happy to be here, first of all. I think the previous presenter did a very good job in terms of making a diagnosis and also what we need to do. Because, like Dawe said, when you teach today's students, as you taught yesterday's, you're actually robbing them of tomorrow. And I think we are doing a great job in robbing tomorrow's students in the way we are teaching them in the colleges. Interestingly, even in engineering schools, in the business schools, we are still teaching book classes. We are still teaching, people to work on such jobs which are structured. And these jobs, as you have said, they're going to disappear. So I think the public policy here should be, in a way, tailored on how do we now have the curriculum informed by the market, by the demand, not necessarily what we think. Because when sometimes we sit in our faculties and I teach in a business school, recently we had a course review. We call them course reviews or program reviews. We sit down and start to think what is relevant for people instead of having the market to tell us what's relevant for them. Most of the students actually we teach tell us that they haven't learned much. They haven't been prepared for the job market. And I think that's very good feedback, which now should be scaled up to public level to ensure that it is included within the curriculum. I have a feeling that in Africa, we are not, because you know, the concerns should be different. I know the Western world is concerned that the jobs they are preparing for now, they are not tomorrow. But already the Western world has an education system. What about us? I think we need to invest in infrastructure. Like, for example, fast internet is missing. Many schools are not having internet. They're still using the blackboard, or now we have graduated a bit to whiteboard. But still, it's the same thing, and many students have never even touched a computer by the time they reach university. And in universities, because of the numbers, we are not able to enable each of them. And yet, the future is there in information, technology, as they have been showing us here. So the first thing is to prepare a platform upon which we can stand to really look into the future, because that platform is not yet there. And I think in public policy, that's quite critical.
I have something.
Yes, please, David.
I think you covered it very well, and I think really insightful way to look at it is what is resistant, what skills are resistant to automation and artificial intelligence. And I think really the human brain and creativity is one of the things that will be really difficult to automate. And so it's more about training for creativity and innovation than really training for any specific operational skill set. That's what I believe.
Thank you very much, David. I agree with you 100%. Recently, I had the opportunity to spend time with teenage students, and I told them, if you don't innovate, you're going to perish. And they looked at me. It was a very strong statement, but I wanted them to wake up. So they looked at me and I said, yeah, it's you either innovate or you perish. You don't have an opportunity at all beyond that. So I do agree with you that innovation is clearly the future. We can't run away from it. I would like to ask you to, let's see which one to go to. Aaron, Mr. Aaron. I would like you to address the issue of reskilling. As the young generation prepares to innovate and obviously learn, even as we prepare for them as governments to set up the right kind of environment for them to learn, we still have a significant adult population that is already skilled, who are facing serious challenges now to be relevant. And where do I start from? If I'm a professional, how do I know that my skills won't be required in the next 5 to 10 years? How do I? What's the diagnostic for the different, should I call them careers or skills? What kind of diagnostic is there for people to do it at a personal level and say, okay, clearly I'm an engineer, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm a teacher, but the future requires me to reskill in the following way. How do we go about that?
Well, I think good question. Number one, I agree that the future of jobs, the future of work, is a reality. The future of work reality for millions of workers and many companies already. The shift between human beings, machines, and algorithm, and in terms of labor, is happening at a very, very fast pace, causing huge disruptions. But despite that, the job outlook is positive. I can give an example. When we opened here as Jumia in 2014, our division of task hours between humans, machines, and algorithm was about 21% machine and algorithm, and then 79% human. You fast forward to today, 2019, it's about 50-50. We've automated many of the functions. If I was to give an example, if you order food on the Jumia food platform, from the moment you place an order to the moment a driver reaches your door, there's no human intervention. So we're able to communicate with the restaurants, we're able to auto-dispatch to the closest driver, we're able to navigate to you, and the only human interaction happens when things have gone bad. Now, the same thing we've done with our warehousing and logistics, fairly automated from the vendor to the warehouse to the last mile hub to the driver to your doorstep. Despite that, we've seen that our numbers in teams has grown about 10 times over. So whereas we're automating more every day, our teams are growing across the board. And so the reality is that indeed there's functions that machines cannot displace. And second is what we need to focus on is the efficiencies that technology and algorithm have been able to give us. And those efficiencies are the ones that help us invest in other sectors, whether it's logistics, it's warehousing, it's business intelligence, market research, and so on and so on. And these are the areas that will continue to grow. How does someone who is not an engineer, somebody who's not a developer, someone who's not a marketing specialist, or someone who's doing skill sets that we know we will need regardless of the development of technology? I think with this future of work, there has to be a lifelong learning. That we have to look at the way of survival and the way of living is to learn constantly. And as you can see, many of these skill sets are teachable. You can teach yourself, or there's many resources to learn and grow. I'll give you an example. I am not a business development. I never did business, my academics. I was interested in all the other social sciences. But the future of work is that everybody can do anything. And that's what we need to look at, that is that we can do anything, but it will take a lot of lifelong learning. It's going to be a painful disruption in the near term, but unless you're willing to learn, you're willing to adopt, and you're willing to take on skill sets that are going to be important in the near future, it's going to be very difficult. There's not much. Obviously, government can play a role, but outside of that government intervention, we as individuals, we as people who are in threatened industries, need to accept that the new way now is to constantly learn and develop and adapt.
Wow. Okay, he has touched on something. Yes, Dr. Magara.
I think it's going to become very increasingly important to follow your passion. In the days we were making choices in high school, we were told, choose this course or do this. Our parents played a very big part. Today's parents have to be very involved in helping children identify their passions. Because there's so much, as you say, there's so much you can learn by yourself. When people are in their area of passion, they become creative. So that's going to become critically important in terms of, as we move into the future, people functioning where they're wired to function.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Magara. And the next question is coming to you. But before I go there, Mr. Kawamara here has mentioned something that I would want every adult person here to pay attention to: lifelong learning. You don't have a choice. I have young children who